Hi, this is Drew. This is Parallax Point, and I'm on the second day of post reboot with this channel. So thanks for following. So I like to keep these videos real and relevant to what's been going on, and trusting that other people who might be going through similar situations will resonate, or that it'll come at the right time to the right person. So I'm just going to open up about that. So I've been diving a lot more hardcore into manifestation lately this year. I've explored this for a long time, on and off, but this year it just really amplified my intention to become a better manifester. And I feel like that for me went hand in hand with sort of this spiritual journey I've been on of understanding more the dreamlike nature of this reality, and loosening up those beliefs that this is a solid, objective, physical world, that this is exactly the way it seems, and leaning more into this feeling and this observation that reality isn't like that, that reality is a lot more fluid and dynamic and responsive to thoughts and emotions. And it's like a mirror in some ways, and in some ways it's also alive and intelligent, and doesn't seem like there really is a fundamental separation between oneself and the rest of reality. So it's something that, I mean, a lot of us hear from one source or another, especially if we're coming from like a new age kind of standpoint. And most people have heard it to some degree with The Secret, but it's one thing to hear it and just have it as sort of a fanciful idea, or even just like a cool idea that you can play with. But it's another thing to let it really sink down into your bones, and to let it infiltrate you and kind of start to undo things in your mind, because such a worldview is really not compatible with the worldview almost all of us grow up with and learn in school and learn from our parents. So I think for a lot of people, they take these ideas of the law of attraction and oneness and manifestation, or even just the idea like this is all a simulation, or this is all an illusion. They take these ideas and they find a way to package them so it doesn't serve as a threat to the fundamental worldview, which I think is often for a lot of us difficult to just displace. And so we add ideas on top of it so we feel comfortable. And generally we have an attachment to the belief in an objective physical reality that has predictable rules, and for the rules that we were taught. And the deeper you go down this sort of this journey, you do start to see more and more why we hold on to such beliefs so strongly. Because from one standpoint, it would seem like it would be like the golden ticket to realize this is all a dream, and you can become a lucid dreamer and shape reality, be a co-creator. But if we have an investment in a story of either being a victim, or investment in a story that I am the way I am, my life is the way it is because of all the things that have happened to me that are mostly outside my control. If we have that belief, then a belief that you are a co-creator of this reality is a real threat. It means that we have to let that identity go that felt bad for all the things that happened to it, and maybe gained a sense of validation from being seen in that way, that I'm the person that all this trauma happened to, I'm the person who's been through all this shit. And at a certain point, we reach a choice where we either let that identity go or we keep holding on to it in some form. And if we keep holding on to it, then we can't actually accept the co-creator status, not in a full conscious way. It still remains somewhat out of reach. Even if we're immersed in the law of attraction community or New Age circles, then it just becomes like a toy. It becomes like something that is still separate from us, something that we have to do all kinds of tricks to get into, or we have to rationalize in some funky ways to add on to our paradigm instead of displacing our paradigm. And there are a lot of funky ways that can show up as all kinds of explanations for how I can manifest something and how that works, that I have to petition a god or angel or spirit guides, that I have to tap into the right energy, that I have to do whatever kind of ritual or do whatever kind of healing practice. We create a lot of these things, or find something that we can hook onto as a buffer, which is really just a buffer of separation between myself and reality. It's a mediator. And so we try to find a mediator so that we can hold on to our old reality, our old worldview, but have something on top of it. But the process I'm going through, and what I encourage people to look at for themselves, is what happens if we just start to dismantle this buffer, and what happens if we just try to have a direct relationship with reality instead of having something in between. And what if we just start seeing that reality is a reflection of us, that our thoughts and emotions are, particularly our charged thoughts and emotions, are constantly showing up in reality as this dance. And when you get into questioning, well, what is the me? What is this entity I take myself to be that seems to be influencing that? That's when you explore some even more subtle buffers of what is identity in general, and what does separate me from everything, and does anything actually separate me from anything. I think that can be a pretty deep, intense journey, and I don't have a whole lot to say on that at the moment, but that's just something I think people can explore for themselves and reflect on. But a lot of what happened for me this year with manifestation is I did have a strong, powerful desire, and you could say I had a lot of heart in it. And I feel like you have to have a lot of heart in something, genuine, authentic desire, that fills your whole being. Um, in order to manifest it, but also in order to become a different person in the process. Because you can manifest things that are relatively insignificant, simple, easy things. And a lot of people do that when they first start out with this. But that's one thing. And then I feel like the real potential of manifestation doesn't just lie in that. The potential of manifestation lies in how we can transform as people. And you're not going to transform as a person fundamentally if you're just manifesting insignificant desires, or if you're trying to manifest an inauthentic desire that doesn't really light up your whole being, that isn't heartfelt. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's been my own reflection on my experience so far. Because I've manifested a lot of things in the past, and in one sense, those have been good experiences, and I don't regret those manifestations, because I got some really important things, like my first apartment. That was exactly what I asked for. The first job I would consider my dream job. That was exactly what I asked for in so many ways. But yeah, I don't want to discount those things. Those things are part of the process, and in some ways they can transform you in maybe an overall sense of giving you what you need in that phase of your life, so you can settle down or relax more, or you can focus on other things that are of highest priority, so that certain needs are met, and it gives you the ability to focus on higher level needs. But I do think it's important to recognize too that there are certain intentions, desires we have that really live deep in our soul, it seems, or that really just activate us on a whole fundamental level. There's sort of a do or die feeling behind it. There's a fire that awakens, that once we tap into that, once we clarify what that desire is and we really own it, it gives us the motivation like nothing we've ever had before. It gives us firepower and fuel, and it gives us the ability to face almost any obstacle. On its own, it doesn't. Having a proper mindset and understanding certain principles of success and manifestation, you could say, are still important. But without this heart desire, without this firepower, this fuel, you can have the other stuff, the mindset stuff and whatever, success principles, and I found for myself things just peter out eventually. Like you don't have enough fortitude to face the inevitable challenges that come with any major journey, with any fulfillment path towards something that you want. And I think in a way that's a good litmus test for understanding, is this what I really want? Because if it's what you really want on a whole level, not just in your head, not just because someone told it to you, not just because it sounds like a cool idea, not just because it seems like a means to an end, but because it in a way you maybe can't even fully explain, it just lights something up within you, with your whole being. It makes you feel more alive. That's the thing. If it makes you feel more alive, if it even in the pursuit of it, you start feeling yourself changing as a person, or being faced with some really interesting tests from life and the universe that will challenge you to rise above your past self will challenge you to change as a person. If it's not doing that, then you could say in a way you're not following your life's path to the fullest, that you're missing something out, that there's still some clarity that needs to be resolved. There's something that you haven't quite found yet. And everyone has sort of a different path in life, and I think in a way two things can be true here. In a way, it's not necessary as a human being to experience this kind of impassioned fire, to experience this kind of soul level activation. I think there are a lot of us who, this is going to sound bad, but I think there are a lot of us who, in some sense, it's just like we just want to stay comfortable. We just want to have like a predictable life. We want our worldview handed to us. We want to go with things that happen and not have to overthink, not have to think too hard about ourselves or reality. We only want to change when it's convenient, when we have no other choice, or when where a lot of us really don't want to change. We just kind of want to stay the same person, be who we are, and let life happen to us. And in an ultimate sense, there isn't anything wrong with that. But some of us get triggered at that. Some of us feel like this angst or even this like hatred for the idea of that. Some of us feel like that's not even fully living. That's just a half life. Some of us would even rather be dead than to live that kind of life. And in an ultimate sense, there's nothing wrong inherently with that either. And for those of us who feel that, other people might demonize it who don't understand it. But if we demonize it within ourselves, if we try to suppress it, if we think, okay, I'm just not accepting my life the way it is, I'm not accepting myself the way I am, I just have to learn radical acceptance better, I just have to go to therapy, I just have to find the right hobbies in life and the right people to be around and just be more engaged with life. And just what it amounts to is the advice we're given often, and the advice we usually think is right, is I just have to make myself more comfortable. And oftentimes this happens subconsciously. This doesn't necessarily happen in a fully conscious way, but a lot of us just kind of slide into that comfort zone, and we just try to make the comfort zone more comfortable so that we can resist this sense within ourselves that something isn't right here, like this isn't the way I'm supposed to live. So that's one way some of us can approach it. I'll just call us, the black sheep. But another way we can approach it is that we sort of divert that energy, or we let it be co-opted into something else that on the outside, on the surface level, seems like it's different, seems like it's gonna fulfill that need, that calling within ourselves for deep transformation. But in reality, it's not. In reality, it's just really just a diversion. I think the most common way I see this play out is with entrepreneurship. Like for those of us who are black sheep, who feel like I can't live that life of just comfort, of just like monotony, doing the same thing, being the same person for the rest of my life, with very little change. I can't do that. That doesn't feel right to me. We'll find something that seems like it's the golden ticket, that seems like it's a path towards real self-actualization. And that's usually how entrepreneurship is sold. And adjacent things, just that's what most of the self-help world caters to speaking to that need within ourselves, but oftentimes co-opting it. And in a lot of ways, that's also what the New Age community does. They do the same thing that I'll just say hustle culture does, but with things like crystals and chakras and energy work and spirit guides and all kinds of stuff. They have a lot more room for creativity with that. And you could say different types of personalities are drawn towards one or the other line. You could say the intuitive feeling types might be more drawn towards that New Age track, and the more thinking, discerning types or judging types fall more into the entrepreneurship or hustle culture or self-help track. And there's a crossover too between those two. But regardless, both of those tracks also have their own ways of making you feel or believe that you're going through that fundamental change your soul is calling you towards. But actually, really just keeping you in a different kind of comfort zone. Keeping you locked up in a different kind of distraction, a different kind of loop. And that's what all this amounts to. What I'm talking about with these various ways we can silence the call within ourselves or co-opt it, is it's being stuck in a loop. And that loop is on a fundamental level, staying the same person, having the same worldview about ourselves and reality, and viewing ourselves as separate from life and viewing reality as more solid and real than it might actually be. And that includes the New Age community, because they have a lot of different ways to explain that with higher dimensions and stuff like that allow us to still keep a sense of there is a physical objective reality, but there's also this other stuff on top of it. And they focus on like trying to explore some of that stuff on top of it, and then in theory integrating it down into the physical. And in a certain way, that framework can have utility. I'm not saying it's completely bad, but I don't think it's entirely accurate, and I think it's just another buffer zone for separating ourselves from the rest of reality. Because we still have to go back to the question, well, what is reality in the first place? Instead of adding stuff on top of it, adding new theories, we have to go back to the fundamental question. And even just asking the question, and even just putting some honest thought into it, some honest time into really reflecting on it. Even that, I think, is enough to just get a snowball effect, and it doesn't have to lead to like total enlightenment or anything like that. It just has to loosen up some of our beliefs and just get us to consider things differently. So where I'm going with this is, that was a bit of a long explanation, is all of that stuff is still part of the loop. And some of us feel this angst and this deep discomfort with the way things are. And if we're just honest about it and we explore it, we find that deep within that, there might actually just be a call for, you could say, a death and rebirth process, or dying to the current version of ourselves to be reborn into something fundamentally different. And there are lots of ways we can change on a surface level. And there are lots of ways where we can change behaviors and we can change individual beliefs. And that's what the entrepreneur and New Age tracks both appeal to, because they know how to initiate some of those changes. You can change a set of behaviors, you can change habits, you can change certain thought patterns. And even you can change your lifestyle. And after doing that, you might think to yourself, well, I'm a different person now. And in some sense, okay, sure, that's true. But in a more fundamental sense, it's not necessarily true. Because just changing a few things about yourself, changing some behaviors, some habits, some thoughts, even changing your lifestyle, if you were employed and now you're self-employed, if you were quote unquote lazy and now you're industrious, or even if you used to be logical and skeptical and now you're open-minded and intuitive, those are some real changes. But we have to ask ourselves, who are we still on a fundamental level? And what is our core worldview about ourselves and reality? And even if we've made some of these changes, has our core worldview not just changed, but been replaced? Or even if it hasn't been replaced, have big chunks of our core worldview been hacked off, dismantled? And that's where I think a lot of us can get stuck. And that's where the real crossroads is, it seems, with where this call leads us and what direction our life takes. Because the call is fundamentally asking us to become different people. Not out of self-hate, not out of not from the ego, but from a higher sense of knowing what we can be, of knowing our higher potential. And it leads us, if we follow it, if we trust it, it leads us to that turning point, to that crossroads, where we can either be content with holding on to these superficial changes we made, or whatever we think about ourselves, or there's something that's even more fundamental that we can let go of. And if we don't let that go, then we're just going to stay stuck. We're just going to stay in the loop. It doesn't matter how many behaviors we change. It doesn't matter how we think about ourselves. We're going to stay the same person. We're going to stay stuck in the fucking loop. And just trying to make the loop more and more comfortable. Because that's what it's all about too. Changing the behaviors and the lifestyle, it's about making the loop more comfortable. And finding better ways to do that. And again, for some people, that is their path, and they have a right to it. And as long as it's not creating dissonance within themselves, as long as the comfort is comfortable, then in an intrinsic sense, it's not really a problem. But when there is discomfort that arises, you can either ignore it or you can listen to it. And a lot of people don't know how to support you with that, because most of the marketplace, if you look into self-help, it's catered to helping you feel more comfortable in the loop. in just better and better ways. It's not catered to helping you make the full transition outside the loop, what I like to call the expanse. It's not catered to helping you make the ultimate sacrifice that is required to do that, where you do feel that a part of you actually dies. Because it can actually get scary to approach that threshold. And even though the desire is there, and even though there's something that's pushing you and calling you to cross that threshold, and in some sense you feel like you'd rather be dead than go back to the loop or to stay in it, there's also a fear there. And there is a resistance there. There's something that does get activated within ourselves that pushes back, that tries to convince us to stay, that tries to sabotage our efforts to break out. And it gets very clever at doing that. And we have to get good at spotting how it does that. And we have to trust that source of fire, whatever that is for us. We have to trust the call and not give up on it, and trust the essence of it. Trust where our heart is leading us, not where our ego is leading us, not where our mind is leading us, where the egoic mind is leading us, where all the programs and bullshit beliefs we've taken on are leading us. And it can feel easy to give up if you've tried so hard and you feel like you've come close several times to that edge, and you've almost made it, you've almost crossed over, you've almost broken out of the loop. Or you have broken out and you've gotten sucked back in somehow. It can feel easy to get a sense of defeat and to start thinking like, I'm tired, what am I doing? And that is when other people will come in sometimes, or things will happen, situations that affirm that reflect that back to you, that seem to want to pull on your energy. There's a Bible verse, I'm not Christian, but there's this Bible verse that says, to those who have some, more will be given. To those who have none, more will be taken. Something like that. And it's kind of that feeling when you feel you've come to the threshold and you've almost crossed, you've almost done it. And then the fear kicks in, or some kind of self-sabotage kicks in, and you get pulled back. And then you feel depleted. And then situations might happen around you, or something will come up, or a person will come up that will seem to want to take even more from you, or that will seem to want to, that will seem to be like a test. And then you really have to find it within yourself to summon that heart power, that fire, even in the moments when it feels like you're completely depleted, like you're out, you're empty. There's nothing. You're on a downward spiral. Might as well give up. Might as well numb yourself again. Might as well get comfortable. Accept. And there might be a feeling of like being half alive. And people around you will tell you, well, that's normal. Or you just gotta get used to it. You just gotta accept life. And if you're really aware of manifestation, you'll go onto social media and you'll start seeing those messages reflected back to you on Instagram and Facebook. Because that's the thing, social media, reality is a mirror, and that includes social media. It mirrors to you. It's algorithmic, but in a more fundamental sense, it's part of the reality mirror. So your posts are going to reflect where you're at. And if you're feeling this firepower and you're approaching the threshold and you have this conviction you're going to get it this time, like you're going to break out, you'll see posts that will say, you're in a frequency of manifesting miracles, keep going, or your beliefs create your reality, or what you trust will manifest. You'll get those kinds of messages. But when the fear kicks back in, when you fall back, when you get sucked back in to the loop, when you feel depleted, the messages change. They will say, sometimes you just have to trust. Sometimes you just have to accept where you are and let go. With every failure comes a lesson. With every this comes a that. With mistakes, blah, 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 blah. And they'll sound nice and sagacious and like what you should need to hear. But maybe you'll be angry at that. Be like, if you understand that reality is a reflection, you'll be like, fuck you. Because those messages, even though they sound nice and wise, are fundamentally still mirroring your own self-doubts and where your energy has fallen to. And there is obviously some truth to that. I'd say you have to recognize where you are in order to change it. I wouldn't say there's a certain tone with some of those messages where it does feel self-defeating and like it's just the loop closing in to comfort you and lull you back to sleep. But I think what it really you just got to recognize where you are in order to change it. And then you refocus. One of the last psilocybin journeys I did in Mexico was this message came through really strongly for me. This mantra, just focus. Just come back to your highest aims and focus on them. And don't allow any room for any thought, any belief, any pattern that contradicts it. Don't invest any time and energy into anything that contradicts your highest aim. Just focus. And I remember repeating to myself at a certain point when I felt like I was spiraling into fear, just focus, just focus. And that was sort of a bridge for me. It was like a lift to raise me to a point of more self-empowerment and more conviction. And sometimes we just need that. So I'd say if we fall, if we miss the mark, and we get to a place of depletion and negative thinking, we have to remember, just focus. What is our highest aim or aims? What is the thing that initiates that fire within us? And if we're feeling the angst, if we're feeling the discomfort and the comfortable, if we're feeling some kind of call, that means that fire is somewhere. And we just have to clarify it. We just have to dig into it, clarify it. It could be that we have repressed it. It could be that we've, even as it tries to speak to us, that we try to ignore it because maybe it's anchored to pain. And oftentimes it is. There's sort of two sides of the same coin, with pain on one side and the fire or the heart power on the other. Oftentimes they're two sides of one coin. So there could be an intense pain there that we've been also trying to avoid. But the fire is on the other side of that. So that's something that I discovered last year. And as intense as the pain is, it does give us power if we allow ourselves to fully face it and to discover what's on the other side of that pain. Because that is the key to manifesting what we want the most. That is the key, not just manifesting from an egoic standpoint, not just manifesting to get whatever we want. That manifestation that is intrinsic with our life path, that manifestation that is calling us to a higher level of being, of potential. I'm talking about the kind of manifestation that doesn't just change our life, but changes who we are fundamentally. And if we keep ignoring that, we're always going to stay stuck in the loop. And again, I know it's easy to start losing faith if you keep trying and you keep trying and you feel like you're getting close, and then you fall back again, and then you sabotage again. It's hard enough to do that from just typical egoic desires or just typical things like, I think I want that, or I think I want this. That's already hard enough, but if it's almost, it's a soul level pain when you do it from a heart desire. When you do it from something that feels like you can't live life the same without passing through this. That something fundamentally says you can't go back. You can't squeeze yourself back into that loop and numb yourself. So you could even say there's more of a desperation there. And desperation typically isn't good for manifesting something. But behind the desperation is firepower. And if you can access the firepower instead of staying in the desperation, and then if you can access the trust, that's ultimately the source of this. You could say the trust is one of the deeper roots of this desire. There's a trust there. Somewhere, whether it's front and center or way back, there is a trust somewhere there. Even you could say a certainty that this is your path, this is for you. And the trust feels like a spaciousness. When you go into it, it feels like a spaciousness, an openness, like an allowing. It's different from the desperate energy. And I don't want to label the desperate energy as bad, because honestly, sometimes you need it, even just initially, to, if you fall way back down, you need something to kind of crawl you back up. Like in the emotional tone scale, which I don't fully buy into, but there's some relative truth to it. Each person has their own unique tone scale, I believe. But sometimes desperation is just like a way to like crawl yourself back up from that mess, from a place of like total depletion. Sometimes that desperation, you need it to go up a few steps. You don't want to stay there because it's if you stay there, it's going to sabotage things. But if you just recognize it as just a little helper for a temporary, brief period, even just for a few hours or a day or a few days, that you can transcend once you have enough energy, once you can return to a place of trust, then it's not so bad. But you have to recognize it for what it is and see its limited utility for a specific place in your journey. And then from trust, if you go into the trust, it feels spacious. It feels like there is a sense of allowing, like there's a sense of working with the universe, not trying to force things, not working against it. It feels like it's part of your higher calling. It feels open, more open. It's from that place that I think opportunities come, signs, synchronicities come, flow comes. And you have to stay in it. And that doesn't mean that fear can't come back up, because obviously it does sometimes. And obviously things come up that test us. The core axiom seems to be get out of fear, get back into trust whenever you can, how often you need to. Get out of fear, get back into trust. Even if fear comes up 1,000,000 times, get out of fear, get back into trust. Train yourself. Because if you don't do that, if you let fear win, if you let fear suck you back in, and what fear does is when it sucks you back in, it no longer looks like fear anymore. It transmutes into comfort. Then you're living back in the comfort zone, thinking that the fear has subsided, thinking that you've been rested and come back to your senses. But in reality, fear has just won. And you're living under the reign of fear again. If you let fear win, you go back to the loop and you stay in it. You go to sleep. You don't realize your fuller potential. Those are the stakes. The stakes are you live the rest of your life half dead, being comfortable, but being asleep. You never realize your full potential. You never realize your greater freedom. You stay half dead. And maybe you have a moment of lucidity before you die, where you regret it. Maybe. And in a fundamental sense, it's not inherently bad. But if there was something within you that was calling you to something higher, and you remember that too late, it's probably going to be a shitty feeling. It's going to feel like a life unfulfilled. Those are the stakes. And the risk is once you fall asleep again, it's really hard to wake yourself back up. It takes tragedy, it takes crisis, usually, to get you to wake up again. And that's probably why you're even questioning this in the first place. That's probably why you're allowing yourself to feel this call, to not ignore it at the present moment, and to maybe feel the pain of it, because probably something tragic happened to you recently, or some crisis happened. Maybe you lost a job, maybe you lost a loved one, maybe you had a near-death experience, maybe you heard or read something really hardcore that triggered an existential crisis. Maybe you became disillusioned with society or politics. Maybe you became disillusioned with your religion. Maybe you were backstabbed by someone you trusted. Maybe you had a really intense psychedelic experience. Or a peak experience. Something happened that woke you out of your slumber. And it's not easy to get woken out of your slumber. If you've already been woken up and you fall back asleep and you haven't been asleep too long, then maybe it doesn't take as much to wake you back up. But I feel like it's just not worth going back to sleep. If you can avoid it, if you can stay aware, if you can recognize what's happening, don't let yourself go back to sleep. Don't let fear win. See it as a temporary battle that you can overcome. Because it's about the war, it's not about the one single battle. And that battle could be just a couple hours, it could be a day or a few days. It doesn't have to be months, it doesn't have to be years. You just have to stay aware. Don't let anything pull you back in. I'm saying this just as much to myself as everyone here. All right, thanks for listening.